I think there are two fundamental responsibilities of global citizenship. One is to work very hard to understand the things that you find strange or threatening. Because we live in a world that marches to several different drummers. And if we try to interpret them simply in the context of our own music, we won't understand them. And if we don't understand them, that leads to real and terrible conflict. And in a world in which so many of the interconnections are now informal, whether by the internet or otherwise, individual attitudes toward others are really, really critical. And so I think that question of understanding people who aren't like you, aren't like us, is very essential. And secondly, there's an opportunity for engagement, for being involved in these things on their front lines, that is immense. And Canadians may not believe this, it is much larger for Canadians than for others, both because we're lucky, we tend to have more education, more skill, but that's an individual factor that is pretty general in our country. But there is also a reputational country factor. We are trusted more than other countries. We have a relation with colonialism. We were a colony, and that was a long time ago, but it is remembered in countries that were colonies. And so we are not held as suspiciously in English-speaking countries as the UK is, in French-speaking countries as France is. I'm not speaking pejoratively of them. I'm saying we have this advantage. And also, we've had to deal with diversity at home, and we've done it with remarkable success. We did it before our country began. I mean, our protections for Aboriginal people were there before we became a country. In the United States, they were created by the country after it was created, not ours. Our courts have found that Aboriginal rights were there before we were there, and we've learned, not often well, but we've learned to live with them. And our capacity, our need to create a country after, in effect, a civil war, led to remarkable cooperation on really difficult questions, language. What laws, what legal system should we be judged by? Even questions that were very basic in local communities as to what was the system of land tenure and land distribution. We found compromises on all of those things, and we established from those very early days a tradition of diversity that is recognized. A long time ago, in another Zimbabwe, before it became such a terrible waste of accomplishment, I spoke to someone who ran schools there, hired teachers, and I forget how we got into it, but he said, everything else being equal, I will hire a Canadian, because Canadians are more likely to understand and be respectful of the surprises they find in their classrooms. And that wasn't a question about discipline. That was a question about what your mind and your intuition led you. So we have these assets. And if you think that's simply a potential, go and look at international organizations. How many Canadians work for the Carter Center? How many Canadians work for the National Democratic Institute? I ran into a woman from Vancouver a couple of years ago, a striking woman in high heels and fancy, 30. She would be 27, 28. She held the pen while Kofi Annan was negotiating the conflict in post-election Kenya. But before that, she'd spent 6 weeks literally in a tent on some desert border dealing with an organization called the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. There is a legion of young Canadians who are doing that sort of thing, I think proportionately more than any other country, proportionate to population. And increasingly, there are Canadians who aren't so young who are doing that. Because I'm recognizable in foreign airports, I run in, particularly in Africa, I run into all sorts of people who are going into Africa in work related to their faith, religious groups. And sometimes they're going there with they're going to stop Africans from doing things they think they shouldn't be doing. My observation is that once those people go into a community where they have, with their background of having made things work in local communities in Canada, they don't put aside their church or their faith. Their faith brought them there, but they become very practical and trusted helpers of places none of us has ever heard of, but where lives will be better because those Canadians have been there. And again, lots of people in the world do that, but disproportionately Canadians are inclined to do that, and it's a way of making a real difference on a human level in the world. And the talents are odd. I mean, years ago, I went into as Prime Minister. I flew into a wheat project in the high lands of Tanzania. And I went around and I talked to people and I said, "Where are you from and what do you do?" And they said, "I'm so-and-so and I'm an agronomist and I'm this and I'm that." And I ran into some guy and I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I'm the most valuable guy here." I said, "I'm from Bluffton, Alberta, and I fix things with barbed wire." And he was the most valuable guy there because in a society like that, you needed to find some way that you could cope with sort of small problems that no agronomist had studied. But there they were, and that was a long time ago. I suspect there are more proportionate even to population now around the world. And so there's an opportunity for engagement. Is it satisfying? You ask the people who go. You ask the people who go. I ran into a nun we were having a little argument. Our argument was about whether Rimouski was more beautiful than the Rocky Mountains. And neither one of us was going to win the argument. But I said, "I take it you're from Rimouski." This was in French. She said she was. And I said, "When were you back?" And she said, 50 years ago. And I said, "You've been here for 50 years? And she said, "I have." And I said, "What do you do?" She says, "I teach children." I said, "Do you miss being home?" And she said, "I could not have had a better life." Well, that's it. I'm tearing up with that story. That's a story that tears you up. And is a woman from Rimouski who spends 50 years teaching kids remarkable in a way she is. Is she alone? No, she isn't. There are lots of people who would do that. And again, it's very much part of the Canadian reputation, and I think the Canadian tradition.